All right, good morning. I'm Jeremy Gilbert. I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives here at the Washington Post, and I'm thrilled to moderate our last panel of the morning on the ethical and social implications of artificial intelligence. I'm joined by a real esteemed panel of experts. Jack Clark is the Director of Communications and Strategy at OpenAI, which is a nonprofit AI research company. Meredith Whitaker is the co-founder and executive director of the AI Now Institute at NYU University. And Milind Tambe is the founding co-director of the Center for Artificial Intelligence and Society and the director of Team Core Research Group on Artificial Intelligence and Multi-Agent Systems at the University of Southern California. Thank you all for being here. If you have any questions for our speakers, please tweet them to us using the hashtag Transformers, and I'm going to get the discussion started right now. So this is an interesting group with some very different perspectives, but one of the things that seems to unite you is the importance of the impact of artificial intelligence. The kind of question of how we weigh, for example, what large institutions might have as business interests using artificial intelligence versus societal good. How do we decide who gets to be the beneficiary of the gains of artificial intelligence when we're weighing those two things?
The University of Southern California Center for Artificial Intelligence in Society is something I co-founded with Professor Eric Rice. This is a collaboration between AI researchers and social work. And so this is, we're very proud of this sort of a collaboration that's interdisciplinary, but really with social workers who are out there in the field. And so the kinds of so the grand vision is AI to address sort of grand challenges of the American Academy of Social Work and Social Welfare, ending homelessness, achieving equal opportunity and justice, and so forth. There are 12 grand challenges of the National Academy of Engineering. So within those, I guess our focus has been on concrete problems where we can really assist and make a difference in working with low-resource populations, such as with homeless youth, or in conservation, trying to protect endangered wildlife, or in public safety and security. And so we are focused on augmenting human decision-making, so things that are already being done by humans in these organizations, but to assist them with software decision aids. So that's the focus of the work that we've been doing.
It sounds like this is a very impact-focused kind of artificial intelligence. Do you feel like the field at large is focused on impact, even whether it's business goals or social good, or do we run the risk of AI as really working towards novelty, trying to solve an interesting but not useful problem?
So this is a question that's very near and dear to my heart. Speaking to the research community, I feel that in AI, we need to focus more on impact. And it's because when we publish and so forth, novelty is given a higher weight and impact is not. And so as a result, but it's up to us as researchers, as senior researchers in AI, to redefine what are important ways to measure progress for younger researchers. Because if the reward system is such that what counts is novelty and not impact, then essentially that's where people will go. But impact, and if we want to see societally beneficial impact, then that's something that we as researchers need to define as an evaluation criteria so that people speak to that and do research in that area. And I guess we are not saying that novelty has no value. Obviously, we're saying complement or add additional weight on social impact, so there's more balance and not just sort of pure novelty. And there is research going on, but I feel not enough, and we could do more to encourage that.
So how do we close that gap? How do we get from saying there are specific researchers or engineers who are designing these algorithms that they are then either placing in a black box or maybe in some cases exposing, to having a voice from the people who are being impacted by those algorithms? What's the way that we close that?
So at least for us, one major way of trying to do this is through immersion. So our students, myself or others, we actually want to go to the location where the impact is to be measured and work with the people there. It's problem-centered. It's coming from the domain. And so when it comes to conservation, we've actually patrolled in forests in Malaysia and so forth to really understand what is really the problem, or go to the forests in Uganda with working with the homeless shelters in Los Angeles. So be there, we are working with social workers. It's fundamentally interdisciplinary. It just can't be AI researchers figuring this all out by ourselves. And I always try to think about showing humility, so working with public safety or security, working with the Coast Guard, for example, that we can't be sitting in LA at USC and just saying, we know better how to drive your boat, so we're going to tell you. We really need to go beyond the boats in New York and understand how they work, and so that we can develop algorithms that are more appropriate to the location and are done in an interdisciplinary fashion, are responsive to the needs of those who are using it, and so on.
Is there also a question of, you touched on Meredith, transparency, but also regulation? So who gets to say whether the algorithms being used, the automated approach being selected is fair, and fair to whom?
So I agree with all that was said earlier with respect to, government help in regulation and so forth. But in addition to that, as we discussed earlier, it's also within the research community. This is now sort of evolving into more of an interdisciplinary science, and therefore the need for us as researchers in AI to reach out to other people in other disciplines, and really to force ourselves, to encourage ourselves to do these kinds of measurements. And I'm in full support of what Meredith was saying earlier with respect to really, doing a better job of measuring things in the field and really measuring the impact and assessment. But these sorts of things today are difficult because, if I'm a researcher, publishing these sorts of things, getting getting encouragement from the impact and so forth is a little bit harder. So there is a role for government, but there's also a role for AI researchers to do something about this.
How are those decisions getting made? Are the computer scientists identifying problems they want to solve outside of their own disciplines? Are people coming to them? How do you make that a more inclusive process?
So I think what should happen, and to some extent we strive to make it happen in our center, is to, as I was saying earlier, user-centered problem solving. So you start from the problem. And for some people, it's kind of confusing. Why do you start from a problem? Why not start from a solution? Which is not necessarily the best approach. But anyhow, so if you actually, so I can give you kind of this concrete example where we were trying to come up with better patrolling methods for protecting endangered wildlife in Malaysia, for example. And we could sit in LA and come up with, this is the best patrolling routes. And the people that we were talking to on Skype were saying, no, this doesn't work. This absolutely doesn't work. It's the shortest distance between 2 points is not a straight line. And to us, it's like, how can that be? So we flew down to Malaysia. We actually patrolled in the forest. And suddenly we realized, you have to walk along ridge lines. You have to walk along riverbeds. You can't just walk in a straight line in a forest to patrol. It doesn't make sense. These are types of things that can only be gained by being on the spot in real life, and sort of rather than just sitting in the lab and saying this is a. Now, I want to be sure there's a lot of wonderful theoretical work researchers are doing. This must continue. I mean, pure basic AI research has to continue. But there's space for this additional kind of work. And this requires us to get out of the lab and get out in the field. And rather than focusing on what is readily available as a data set, like ad auctions and so forth, to focus on new kinds of problems where data sets are not necessarily easily available, where it is harder to do that kind of work.
And this is essentially part of the challenge is if the people you put in the room are codifying their own biases into the algorithms that they create, you're going to A, get back the results that they probably expect, but B, probably not recognize all of the problems. Inclusion is certainly one technique. Is there an issue of awareness as well?
So I guess in our work, the focus is more on augmenting humans who are making decisions in very complicated situations. So if you're trying to spread information about HIV prevention, which is one of the problems we're working on, who are the right youth to select in a homeless shelter to spread that information. This is a task where you're looking at the social network, trying to figure out who are the right people. These kinds of tasks are already being done by human beings. We're augmenting their capabilities. But we want to achieve the right kind of balance, not over-prescribe. So the right level of autonomy. If we are trying to tell rangers in Uganda that this is where you're going to find snares, well, you can give them a certain area, say 500 meter by 500 meter area. So this is where you're going to find it. We don't have the ability to tell them, well, you're going to find it under this tree. I mean, they are experts in that domain, and we should harness their expertise where possible and leave AI to do what it knows best. And understanding this right level of balance between the teamwork between humans and AI is also an important aspect of research as we go forward.
So the last question I would pose to you, and I think you were very much hinting at it here, is if there is fear in the community, and you wrote about this recently, and by community I mean outside of the AI community, honestly, it's at this sort of replacement of humans for specific tasks. How do you balance the fact that work and a sense of purpose is really important for lots of people against the idea that there are lots of rote tasks and things that can be done to either augment or to avoid certain actions? Where's the balance?
I want to agree with a lot of what's said, but I also want to say that there's a lot of immediate benefit that we can accrue from AI by deploying them in low-resource communities for domains like suicide prevention or substance abuse prevention, or the kind of domains that are important for low-resource communities, for conservation, for public safety. And these are things we can do today. And we should not lose sight of the benefits that AI is providing there already, and not get so fearful that we will stop that kind of work. So that is important for us to continue forward.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. I'd really like to thank Jack Clark, Meredith Whitaker, and Milind Tambe for joining us. If you'd like to watch video clips from any of today's discussions or past Washington Post Live programs, please head over to WashingtonPostLive.com. I'm Jeremy Gilbert. Thank you so much for watching today. That's great.